All right, the famous beef jerky recipe. This is so delicious. People ask me how long it lasts, as you know, beef jerky is one of those foods that's supposed to last a long time, and this has never lasted more than 2 weeks. So what we're gonna need for this is some eye of round steak. Now this isn't the highest quality of beef, or the quality cut of beef, just due to its leanness, which actually makes it perfect for beef jerky. Normally the eye of round does have this fat cap on it. We are going to remove that briefly, but I got 5.5 pounds of eye of round here. We're also going to need some Worcestershire sauce, some soy sauce, and this is actually kind of a low sodium recipe overall. You know, when you think of jerky, you think of something that's super salty. The only sodium that we're going to put it in actually comes from the soy sauce. So the pineapple juice is actually something I've added recently. It's not part of the original recipe, but that's just kind of to break down the intramuscular tissue and fibers within the meat, and it also gives that great combination with the Worcester and the soy, that real teriyaki flavor. We're also going to need some Mrs. Dash original, some crushed red pepper flakes, some Montreal Steak seasoning, McCormick Montreal Steak, which is amazing, some ground black pepper, some brown sugar. I'm using light brown sugar. You could also use dark. Array of measuring cups and measuring spoons, an extremely sharp knife, and also some onion powder, which I will grab in a bit. So I think first step is we will... Oh, and you also need a bowl and a gallon-sized baggie to put these strips in. So the first thing is to remove this fat cap. So what we want to do is actually something I like to stand it up and kind of just work my way down the cut. And the secret about beef jerky, I guess, is that there's a very low amount of fat in it, and that's supposed to preserve it for quite a long time, because the fat will spoil. So the higher the protein or the straight meat content, the longer it will last. And I actually did forget about a bag of this on top of my fridge one time, and it was still edible after about 6 months. I didn't eat it personally because it's hardened up, but my dog loves the stuff. So here, we tried to, there's a little bit of meat left in here, but for the most part, the fat cap is off. And since this isn't meant to be stored for a super long time, super long period, I'm gonna leave that little bit of fat on. Alright, so then the next step is we want to cut this into about 1/2 inch slices. And this is going to be the basis for our strips. Now normally, you see beef jerky in square strips, but what I like to do is I like to cut them into, regular, let's say maybe 1/2 inch wide by 1/4 inch thick, and this is going to dehydrate really, really well. So I'm gonna, this is what one example of a strip look like, and obviously all the moisture will reduce its volume. But I will put that in the bowl. I'm going to kind of process all my meat here, cut all my strips. Some I like to do extremely thin. I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as you're dehydrated here. So I always cut against the grain, and that's to give myself a little bit of chew through this. This isn't the type of jerky that melts in your mouth, although the pineapple does kind of break down some of that intramuscular tissue, intramuscular, connective tissue. I like my beef jerky to have a little bit of bite to it, have a little bit of chew to it. So that's how I make mine. I just, do my raw meat, my seasoning. So we have our strips here. They'll go into our bowl, and I will process this into slices and then cut that up into strips, and then I will do the same thing for this cut here. Alright, well, here we have the other piece of meat. We have our strips that are from our first piece of meat into the bag, and here we have this one. Now, a lot of this weight actually is in the fat cap. You know, there's I guess 2 layers to this fat cap. There's the, you know, the large fat layer, and then there's also what's called the silver skin. And really, you can kind of pull off this whole fat layer just with your hands here. You know, a little bit of knife work would help. But I am going to try to go back in and take out as much of this silver skin as I can. Really, you know, you get better at this over time, but you really want to try to get as much of the fat cap off as possible and leave as much of the meat on there as well. So really, you just kind of want to pull back, and, you know, just like any filleting, essentially, you just want to pull back and, you know, work your way down the cut. Now what you can do is cut it up into chunks, but I'm just gonna keep pulling and keep spinning and just kind of keep rotating as we go here. Actually, once I get to this little pivot point, I'm gonna start at the top and just work my way down, like using ceramic knives. They're easy to work with. Alright, have our fat cap there. A little bit of meat along with it, but that's more than okay. Put it in our garbage bowl here. Now, made a little cut there. We can do, see if we can't try to get the edge of that and almost peel it off like a sticker. A little bit of meat, but that's okay. It does get a little slippery towards the end. All right, so that is a fully processed piece of eye of round. And occasionally what I like to do, instead of cutting my normal, you know, 1/2 inch piece, is do the traditional, cut it really thin, and these make really nice pieces of jerky. You can see how, you know, paper thin that is. So I'll do a little bit in slices like that. I'll continue to cut some into strips, and I guess a professional meat slicer, like a deli meat slicer, these would almost be perfect for jerky slices, but, you know, we'll use a knife for now. Ooh. Alright, well, now we can start adding in our marinade. So we'll have 1 cup of soy sauce. Real careful with this. And again, this is going to be our main source of salt. We're not adding any other salt than what's in the soy sauce there. So give it a nice flavor. We'll add the pineapple juice and the Worcestershire and all the seasonings as well. And next, we will add a juice from 1 can of pineapple. So that's about 1 cup. And I like to, instead of buying pineapple juice, I just like to buy the cans. I just like eating pineapple. Actually, the pineapple has an enzyme in it that breaks down muscle tissue, or not muscle tissue, but tissue. That's why if you've ever eaten too much pineapple, your mouth will get a little tingly. That's the enzymes in the pineapple literally breaking down the liner of your mouth. So into this goes about 1 cup of pineapple juice. Next goes 2 tablespoons, this is the second one, of Worcestershire sauce. And this just adds that umami, that extra savory flavor. It's fantastic, such a great condiment to add. Next, I'll add 1 heaping tablespoon of our Montreal Steak seasoning. And this stuff is the best, and I like to go with the McCormick, with the Montreal. Steak seasoning, steak spice, that'll work as well, but this stuff is the goat. Next, I'm gonna add about a half teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. And this is just to give it a little bit of heat. It's nice, it imparts a little bit of upfront heat, but it doesn't really linger too much. So this is, you know, you can tell that there's some spice to it, but you know, it's not gonna wreck your taste buds. You know, if you prefer it to be spicier, you know, you can crank up the black pepper, crank up the crushed red pepper, throw some cayenne in there. But for me, I just use, you know, a couple pinches or a half teaspoon of the crushed red pepper flake. Next, I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of Mrs. Dash Original. And this is just kind of one of my favorite spice blends. I pretty much add it to, you know, everything that I make. It just has such a great flavor in it. I just love the, you know, vegetable taste to it with a little bit of salt. So we're starting to get pretty seasoned up in there. A couple more ingredients left. Next, I will add 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper. And again, this just gives it that nice little, you know, spiciness, not spiciness, but little, you know, piquant taste to it on your tongue. So, ground black pepper, 1 teaspoon. So, I just noticed that some moisture got into my brown sugar, and it's hard as a rock. So, I am gonna do a little audible, and I am going to use some maple syrup. I'm trying to determine whether I want to use a 1/4 cup or a 1/2 cup. I do like the combination of sweet and savory, which this jerky definitely is. It's more of a sweet and savory, not a sweet and salty. But you know what, I'm going to do 1/2 or a 1/3 of a cup. Perfect. And I think what I'm going to do too is I'm going to add, that's a full 1/3, another tablespoon of the Montreal seasoning, because why not? All right, so a 1/3 of a cup of maple syrup. We'll see how this works. Normally the recipe calls for brown sugar, 2 to 4 tablespoons, depending on how sweet you like it. But for this, we'll just use maple syrup. So I decided I was going to add a teaspoon of onion powder, again, because why not? You know, who doesn't love a flavorful beef jerky? A lot of onion. And the Mrs. Dash Original has a little bit of onion powder and garlic powder in it, but I'm going to add a little bit more. All right, well, we have our nice bag of seasonings, meat, quite a bit of liquid in here, the pineapple juice, the soy, the Worcestershire, all that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to zip it with a lot of air inside, and then we will just kind of make sure everything's all mixed up. And the purpose of the air in it right now is just to kind of give it a little bit of room to move around on the inside, get everything all mixed up. And then once feel that we got all the spices and all the liquids kind of mixed in there and everything's good, we want, you know, all the seasonings on all corners, we'll go ahead and take as much air out of it as we can without making a mess. And that's always the key. All right, so we will zip this up, kind of lay it flat here, and you can see now once we took all the air out, it's almost created a nice, there's a little bit of air in there, but you know, almost like a full marinade. And actually what I'm going to do, and I have in the past, is put this into another bag just in case this leaks out. Sometimes the corners of these leak out. All right, so we have our jerky here. This is going to go in the fridge. We're going to marinate it for 2 straight days. 48 hours in the fridge, and then twice a day what we're going to do is we're going to keep it flat in the fridge, and then twice a day we are just going to flip it over, maybe give it a little scramble in there just to make sure that everything's absorbing all that delicious marinade and spice blend that we made. And then we will put it in a strainer in a couple days, and then we will pop it in the dehydrator. But for now, 48 hours marinating. Okay, well, it is 48 hours later, This bag has been resting in the fridge, turned a couple times a day, and man, does that smell good. Oh, you can really smell that Worcestershire, you can really smell that pineapple. So what we're going to do is, I guess we'll head over to the sink here, and I'm going to take this, and I am going to pop all of it in the strainer, because we do want to get rid of all that juice, all that marinade. So we will take our strips, we'll put it in the strainer, shake it up a little bit, and then we will get them onto our dehydrator, onto the trays. And we'll try to fit as much of the strips as we can without having them touch. Leave a little bit of gap in between that, and we will pop this baddie on. All right, so I'm over here, over the sink here, just so any of this final marinade here can kind of wash off. As you can see, you know, quite a bit of it with a lot of the seasoning has you know, already been removed from the meat, and that's okay because I mean we seasoned the crap out of this, so there's plenty of residual spices on here. So what we're going to do is we are going to attempt to load as much of the meat, and here is one of my slices, you can see, and this is, you can see by the coloring here, you know, why agitating the batch is such a good idea. Here's a little bit of area that hasn't received it. I do think that this flavor will make up for it, but that's the added benefit of mixing up the bag. So what we're going to do is we're going to again fill up as much as we can onto a single tray, and make sure that these do not touch. You know, if they do touch, it's not the end of the world, but there's more of an even dry when they are all separated. And I will be taking the larger sheets with me down to Florida this weekend, so gotta bring the beef jerky for the boys down there. And as you can see, some of these pieces are a little bit different in size, different in thickness. I mean, the goal is to create a very even dry. So what we'll do here is we will fill up all our trays, and then we will pop it on low for 2 full days. So for marinate it for 48 hours, dry it for 48 hours. And this is what I've always done before. I actually used to use a box fan, but I found that the dehydrator works really, really well, and it's more of airflow. So what we're going to do, we will pop this in our dehydrator, and we will fill up the rest of these trays and pop it on. Well, I got 6 trays here, and everything. These trays are full, everything's lined up there. And as you can see, I have my setting to the lowest setting. Really, I'm just looking for like a constant airflow on this. I know that, you know, you're supposed to be heating up meat to, you know, a safe temperature. However, the fat on this kind of, you know, dehydrates the whole thing extremely well. Again, this is what I do. I don't really recommend this for everybody, but this works for me. So I am going to keep it on 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and I am going to dehydrate this for 2 straight days. So this is what it looks like overnight. As you can see, there's a little bit of that crust forming, but it hasn't yet fully dehydrated yet. We're going to leave it for another about 24 hours, and then we'll come back to it and see. But it is starting to dry out and look pretty nice. It smells amazing in here. So here we are after about 8 hours. Looking good. All right, so here we are 48 hours later, and as you can see, it's now melt in your mouth beef jerky, but it does have a great bite to it. It'll last for a long time, and oh man, is it delicious. That soy, that pineapple, and the pineapple enzymes really break down that intramuscular tissue, make it absolutely delicious. Here's a little bit of that thicker piece too. Slice. And there it is, Jack's famous beef jerky.